Apologize for the delay there with the votes. We do not expect votes to interrupt us. Since we're voting about 9 o'clock as our next vote series, if we're still meeting in our hearing at that time, this would be not a good sign. So we don't anticipate that as well, but I do apologize. The 30-minute delay ended up being about an hour and 20 or so before it was all said and done. We will go back and forth here to be able to process through questions. Mr. Spear, if you're okay with the number that's here, I'm okay if we just start opening up questions and we'll just start formally go through this. Ms. Duckworth, is that all right with you? So we'll kind of turn clocks off. We'll start addressing questions, and I have no particular order on that. That way, if you want to be able to interrupt during the questioning time, you're free to be able to do that, to be able to get a follow-up question to any statement that's made. Mr. Griswold, what that will do is that changes our format some. It won't change yours. We typically do a very structured 5-minute time during our first round. Our second round of questioning, it's a more open process where any member can ask a question at any time. Just so if you make a statement, the member that asked you the question is not limited to the one that does the follow-up. Is that fair enough?
Absolutely.
And so we'll just open this up to more conversational style.
Questions, so
great. So yeah, it doesn't change. I guess what's happening on your side of the dais very much at all. It just changed a little bit on our process. I do have a question on the numbers that you submitted to us on the recovery audit appeals work. Percent increase in the non-recovery, I should say. I want to be able to go through a couple of these with you. You list out on the disposition outcome rates: fully favorable, partially favorable, unfavorable, remanded, dismissed, and other. Can you give us a quick definition on what that means to the provider for each of those in the process that happens? Fully favorable, obviously, they've overturned the previous two. It comes back to them. Partially favorable, there's a little bit of a change. I'd like some definition there. Unfavorable, basically they lost entirely the previous two. They're going to appeal then to the fourth level at that point. Give us partially favorable, what that means, remanded, dismissed, and other.
Yeah, partially favorable. Our appeals consist generally of a number of claims that will be submitted with each appeal. And so a partially favorable decision would say that some of these claims are payable and some of these claims are not payable. And so that would be what that is.
So fully favorable, if a provider comes in and they've got 10 different cases in front of you, they won all 10 of those. It may be another one that's another provider comes in, they bring in 10 cases, they won 7 of them or 2 of them or whatever it may be. So we don't know if they won 1 of those or 10 of those in that case, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So unfavorable, they lost all of them.
Right.
Okay. And tell us about remanded and dismissed.
The remanded, we do have some authority to send cases back to the lower level or to the quick if there is information that we need from them, and that information is only available to from CMS and its contractors. And so we can do some limited remands.
Okay. With Part A, that seems to be a very high percentage that's actually being remanded and coming back. Do we know what happens then once they go back down to the second level? What occurs?
Well, actually, with most of these, they have come back to us. And this large number was related to the Part A-B policy issue, which was resolved by CMS through rulemaking, and so those are coming back to us.
Okay, so help us understand the order there. When you're talking about it's coming back to us, that meant it went to the fourth level, it came back to you?
Yes.
What does that mean? So talk us through how that happens.
Well,
because this is a very high number here. You're talking about as many are remanded as are found fully favorable, partially favorable, and unfavorable combined.
Yes. And in these cases, many of the judges decided to remand them. They're basically questions about whether or not claims would be paid as inpatient claims under Part A, or whether they would be paid as outpatient claims under Part B. That was, the basic issue. And so in order to get, many of the judges felt they needed additional information in order to make that decision, and they sent these claims back to the lower level to get that information. What has happened as a result of CMS's rulemaking, and these cases are actually going to be coming back to us, and I think they have come back to us. Okay,
so they're remanded. You got the additional detail. It's now coming back to you. How does that show up in our statistics here, what we're trying to see? What we're trying to evaluate is what's really happening in these cases. When a very high percentage of remanded and dismissed, it's hard to be able to tell what's really going on. Well,
and we don't double count them. I think that's the important thing. They don't recount into our receipt levels when they do come back to us. Because they are not fully disposed of. The cases are still still need an adjudication at our level. And so when they come back to us, we adjudicate them within the process, and then we would send them on. They either get paid or they don't get paid, and many of them will get appealed.
Okay, so I'm still trying to track this. They've gone through the first 2 levels of CMS.
Yes.
They come to you.
Yes. There's
not the information that you need dealing with inpatient, outpatient, whatever it may be. You're remanding it back to CMS.
Yes.
They're getting additional information, and then it comes back to you again?
Yes. That's
okay,
correct.
so there are now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels so far. Excuse me, 5 different events within the first 3 levels.
5 handoffs.
Right. They're coming back to you again.
Yes.
And then I should look at this remanded, sent back, but it would be basically the same percentage between fully favorable, partially favorable, and unfavorable then? You would expect that because you're saying it's not double counted.
When do they come back?
No, it's not a double count. When it
Right.
comes back
That's what I'm
into
saying. But when it comes
Oversight-
back to you again, I should expect it to be something similar to this percentage that's coming back. I'm trying to find out what happens when it's remanded. Are they more likely to be found favorable or unfavorable when it comes back after being remanded?
I don't think that the remand doesn't predispose it to any sort of disposition when it comes back.
Okay.
When it comes back to us, we adjudicate it as all other claims, and, we'll have a hearing on it and make a decision.
So this is somewhere around 60%, just Part A, around 60%, 65% being found fully favorable when they're coming to you. I should expect if they're remanded, it's about the same percentage coming back again. That once they're remanded and they get through that. So basically, if they are very, very persistent, in Part A at least, pretty good chance they're going to be found fully favorable.
I think if the percentages hold true, then you can use those percentages to say what will happen with the remands when they come back.
Okay, and that's approximately how long? Because again, getting to you the first time, they have consumed 3 years in the process. Then it gets remanded. It goes back to CMS. They handle it in 3 months, whatever it may be, and then they're waiting back in line again. That may be another 3 or 4 years to get back in line to get to you. So a remand is an incredible amount of time.
It's my understanding that these cases are really already back with us, that they were sent back in bulk, and so these are already back in the hearing queue. But as far as how long that took, that's a number I'll need to get back with you on.
So that's what we're trying to figure out, because the remand is a new number that we're trying to track based on what we got last night on this. I'm trying to figure out if it's 3 years to get to you and get a decision, it gets remanded, goes back, and they're back in the queue again. So now we're up to 6 years minimum to get fully through all 5 of those steps.
I believe, I will check on this for you and clarify it, but I believe that they retain their spot in the hearing queue when they are remanded.
Okay, so
Because
once
we
CMS
don't
makes a
give up.
decision, they're right back to you again quickly.
And they're right back into the queue where they were when they left us, because we haven't given up jurisdiction of the claim. We've sent it back for some more information, but it's still with us. And generally, it would come back to the same judge who had it when it was sent, when it was remanded.
Okay.
This year was an aberration. It was a very, very high number.
Right.
We're not seeing that in subsequent years, and we didn't see it in previous years.
Okay. And you feel that's because of the whole issue about inpatient, what's outpatient, that was unique to this year?
Correct.
Is this still with the 2 midnights rule and all of that?
Yes, yes.
What a fun rule. That's gone really, really well. The hospitals love it.
Well, we're waiting to see what impact it will have at our level. We have not seen the impacts of that rule at our level yet.
I've yet to find a fan of that rule, by the way, anywhere. And that seems to be one of those issues that doctors and hospitals raise consistently, saying this affects our decision-making. That wasn't your decision. I'm not blaming you. But I would expect there would be quite a bit coming at you because there's a tremendous amount of frustration around that particular rule.
And I think this is something that we are watching and need to watch. We need to continue to see what the appeal rates are in this Part A and Part B inpatient, outpatient arena.
Okay. Let me ask 2 more quick questions on this, and I want to be able to share this time as well. The dismissed and other.
Yeah, the dismissals are cases where for one reason or another, usually it's because the appellant hasn't properly filed their request for hearing, or perhaps they have abandoned their request for hearing in the process by not showing up for hearing and that sort of thing. And so the cases are dismissed at our level. That is a final disposition of those unless they appeal that dismissal to the Medicare Appeals Council.
So that is an unfavorable sitting out there, but it's basically an unfavorable based on they either didn't show up, didn't file, didn't complete their process. They started the process but didn't complete it.
Correct.
But the previous decision would still stand, which was unfavorable.
That's correct. The quick decision becomes the final decision.
Okay. What is an other?
Yeah,
This sounds like present on our dais.
The other, I will actually, okay. Escalations, it would include escalations to the Medicare Appeals Council. As I mentioned, we have about 152 of those. Occasionally, we have an expedited access to judicial review, but those are very, very rare.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm still a little flummoxed by this remanded number. I just added up the fully favorable, the partially favorable, and the unfavorable, and came up with the number 21,846, which is 9 from this 21,855. So this remanded number that you say get back in the queue, are they getting back in the queue in FY13, or are they getting back in the queue in FY14?
I believe that they came back in FY13 or early fiscal year 14, right about the time that CMS Administrator Tavener issued her, her rulings on this.
But since the number is so close, and maybe that's just part of the aberration, that would mean that virtually every one of these cases was remanded because there was inadequate information.
No, these are not, it's not a cumulative number. I understand that they are close to the same amount, but the remands are exclusive of this fully favorable, partially favorable, and unfavorable. It's a separate category.
Okay, so it's a separate category, which would mean that we're talking about close to 50,000 just in Part A, if you take all of these numbers and add them together, give or take.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let me ask you this. ALJs don't have medical training, correct?
No, as a general rule, they don't. I don't know whether there are any who actually have dual certifications, medical and legal, but they are attorneys who have been selected off an OPM register.
Now, because they don't have medical training, they are somehow trying to determine whether or not a procedure was appropriate or not appropriate, correct?
Medically reasonable and necessary, yes.
So is that system flawed just at the outset?
Well, we have some extensive training for them that is conducted. When they come on board, we do a training session for them that goes over very much of this, but lawyers are involved in medico-legal issues in many, many areas.
But they're advocating typically for one side or another and not judging whether something is appropriate medical procedure or not,
well,
whether someone really needed this procedure. It's more of a philosophical question. I mean, we obviously have engaged in this for a long period of time. I just find it somewhat odd that in the end, there are attorneys like you and me who have been trained a certain way but don't know whether this was an appropriate urology procedure or not.
Well, but in essence, what they're doing is making a judicial decision that is based on the evidence that's presented to them. And, in our setting, that includes the written record, the documentary evidence, and generally during the course of a hearing, also some explanation of medical necessity from either a provider or a supplier of the services. And so that is, that's kind of the way the system is set up for us to be able to rely on the opinions of
As you read your
doctors.
notes so you can respond.
Yeah. Essentially, it's the same thing that I've been saying.
Okay. All
That
right.
we look at the record to determine whether the standards for coverage have been met.
So I think we're all troubled by the fact that 54%, or at least that's the record that we have heard, of the appeals in Part A are sustained. Now, you said earlier that the figure for the first part of this year is less than half that are fully favorable, but fully and partially, to me, need to be lumped together. What is the figure for 2014 for fully and partially favorable?
I don't have a percentage for that.
Could you get that for us, though?
I certainly can.
Okay. So here's the dilemma I see. 54% of the appeals are sustained. So in the medical profession, if you've got a better than 50-50 chance of being sustained, you're going to appeal. So your volume is going to continue to increase as more and more providers recognize that, hey, this is a pretty good, your odds are really good here. And when you have an ALJ who is looking at a set of circumstances, is not a physician but is trained, and is looking, well, from my perspective as someone who is not in the profession, it could be a close call. The procedure has been performed. It's not like there hasn't been a service that has been actually provided in most of these circumstances. So you're going to err in favor of saying, okay, we're going to sustain this appeal. So at some point, I wonder whether we have diminishing returns here. That's more of a provocative question, rhetorical question at this point. But I do think that the construct probably should urge us to think about whether it's the way we should be doing these appeals.
I would like to clarify one thing here, which is that the percentages you're looking at are on the recovery audit appeals. And the reversal rates on those appeals have been higher than the general reversal rate for the agency, which, if it includes all appeals. So for 2014, and again, the numbers I have are fully favorable decisions, but it was just 19.3%. The numbers have been, I'm sorry, that was fully favorable OTRs, and I keep going to that number. I will get you a number on the reversals.
Now, the other thing I've been told is that when CMS actually is present at these hearings, that the decisions are not sustained, but the CMS representative is oftentimes not present. So that suggests to me, again, that we have a system that isn't operating properly, because we want fairness across the entire spectrum. So if one provider shows up, has their appeal, and the CMS person shows up and it's not sustained, but another provider shows up, same sort of circumstance, but the CMS person is not there and it is sustained, we're not providing equal protection under the laws.
Let me, the CMS, what we have found, and there is very limited data on this, and it does come from CMS, but when there is CMS participation at the hearing, the reversal rate does go down. And
by how much? Do we know?
I think it was about 6%, if I remember correctly. It's from about 46%. It was only over a few months of data that we have. I'll get you the exact numbers. But from about 46% down to 40%. Yeah, 40%. And as far as the reversal rates go, if I could, I've got that number now, which is on the dispositions. The overall favorable rate in 14 is 35.2%. We have been doing a number of things which have been designed to bring our policy interpretations in line across all levels and to develop some consistency in adjudication. Part of that is training, and we have had approximately 20 training sessions have been delivered by CMS, their doctors, and their policy experts to the administrative law judges since 2010. And so what you will see if you look at the historical data is that the reversal rates have actually been going down. They were at a high in 2010, 55.5% fully favorable, and that is now down to 35.2%.
Why?
I think that the training efforts have a lot to do with that.
So you think you have a better quality of decision because they're dealing with every case in front of them, having to make a decision.
Yes.
So the question is, the cases coming to you, they either made better decisions at a lower level, or there's something that's happened at the ALJ level with better training that you're making better decisions, and the decisions earlier you were finding people fully favorable more often than what would be consistent with policy.
Yeah, or that joint training leads to better consistency among adjudication levels.
But that still would mean that at some point you've got some people making fully favorable decisions that should have made partially or unfavorable. If you're saying better training has fixed that, that would say there was an issue at some point that we were doing too many fully favorable or partially favorable.
I don't think I would go so far as to say it has fixed it, but I would say that it has improved it. And I think the goal is, as Congresswoman Spear points out, the goal is to have the case paid, if it is a validly payable claim, to have it paid as early in this process as possible and keep them from reaching the ALJ level.
Mr. Chairman, may I add a little something to this? I just want to touch on this. Is there training coming from you, the ALJ, back down to CMS, feedback back to CMS? And is CMS accepting that at the RAC audit? And I'm going to use an example that's happening in the orthotics and prosthetics industry, where after an artificial limb is made and delivered to the patient, the claim is being denied by RAC audits because the actual words "patient is an amputee" does not appear in the physician's notes. But the words "patient requires artificial limb or prosthesis" appear, and the Medicare history includes payment for the surgeon to conduct a limb amputation. And so many of these denials could be eliminated if, when they get to the, and these are, getting reversed at ALJ. Is there feedback going back down to the CMS saying, look, just because the exact words does not appear in the surgeon's note that the patient is an amputee doesn't mean that you deny these. Because if you look, it says that the physician is saying they need a prosthetic and we pay them to amputate a limb. And so are you in CMS and the RAC audits looking at different records? Are you, because, no.
I mean, as a general rule, we review the same record. Now, there are some exceptions to that. There's a good cause exception, which allows additional evidence to be presented at the ALJ level. But we are supposed to be deciding things on the same record. What does change significantly is the fact that we do have a hearing. And so at our level, we are able to, question the provider supplier, receive some explanation, and then make a decision. That becomes part of the evidence that's in front of us.
But my understanding is that the auditors are not allowed to consider the O&P professional's notes, but those notes are considered part of the physician's record, and they show up under the physician's record. So the O&P, that the person who makes the artificial leg, his notes, the RAC auditors are not allowed to look at his notes. They only look at the physician's note. But when you look at the physician's note, you look at the entirety, which includes the prosthetist's notes. Is there feedback coming from you to CMS to allow their RAC auditors and the lower levels to say, you need to look at the prosthetist's notes because you're pushing these people in the system, and it's ridiculous when someone is being, something as simple as patient is an amputee is missing from a record from a guy that we paid already to have his leg amputated.
Yes, and we do have regular meetings with CMS and with their appeals group within CMS. I think those happen on a weekly basis. And when we identify a trend, we would bring that up at those meetings, or if it was a significant trend, I would bring it up with Marilyn Tavener. I'm not aware of the specific instance that you are describing.
Oh, it's more than one. We have 100 orthotists and prosthetists in this country who've gone out of business waiting to be reimbursed, and have gone out of business. And so it's more than one, and I am sure that we can get you a lot of those examples.
As we become aware of them, I think that's part of the, part of the issue. Our judges are individual adjudicators, and so we have to become aware that there is a trend. And when we do, we have those feedback loops in place, and we are able to do that.
How do you spot a trend? Do you have a system in place at the ALJ level to figure out, to find those trends? And I think Mr. Meadows, my colleague from South Carolina.
Well, I just want to reiterate what the gentlewoman from Illinois was talking about. She's exactly right, and this is not just unique to her particular group that has told her. I mean, we've got physicians who literally go through step 1 and step 2 that have complete records, and it has to go to you before you look and say, oh gosh, it's a complete record, and they've waited how many months or years to find it. And it's crazy stuff, Ms. Griswold. I mean, she's given that. I got examples. I mean, after this last hearing, we started hearing from all over the country, from claims that were denied because the date, instead of being at the top, was at the bottom, or the physician had signed his name in this spot and they weren't taking the. I know we can't fix stupid, but it seems like that's what we've got to do here, because it's just, I mean, a reasonable person would do this. And you talk about trends. I don't know how you define trends, because you've got adjudicators that are adjudicating across the Omaha system. So what one adjudicator is seeing as a trend in his or her jurisdiction, it doesn't work. And so I just I appreciate the gentlewoman yielding. I'll yield back.
I just have one final thing, and that is, as you go to meet with the newly confirmed Secretary Burwell, I was hoping that you would consider having a conversation with her about granting the same kind of relief from RAC audits that was being granted to hospitals under Part A through the work under the 2-midnight rule to Part B providers like those in orthotics and prosthetics. If we're going to grant it to the hospitals under Part A, I think that we need to consider granting it under Part B, especially since there is a halt to the hearings at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll certainly convey that.
Ms. Lewin-Grisham, do you want to jump in? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And at the risk of, quite frankly, piling on now in the last couple of comments and statements, I have the same concern. I applaud that you've introduced new initiatives so that your productivity is better, but now we're minimizing. My information says that the average hearing is now 2 hours, and given the complexities, although we haven't talked about the complexities, we've talked about the easy stuff, I'm not sure gets addressed. And while I know that given that we now have an incredible backlog and we are struggling with this, it's time to do more than just sort of figure out the steps, how we're touching these cases, how we're cross-communicating, what the training looks like. We have to maybe do something up front, and the up front is nobody on this committee, and I dare say no one in Congress, is willing to tolerate waste, abuse, and fraud. We want you, everyone in the system, to do everything you can, not just to minimize it, eradicate it. But these are clearly administrative issues. And while I expect providers to be as administratively competent as they can, I can't, with consistency, and I'm a lawyer, even read a Medicare EOB. Given that, the likelihood that you make mistakes, simple. The form says, put the date at the bottom, but that form was updated this year. I've got 200,000 forms from last year, and instead of throwing those away, we're just going to, and no one pays attention to that. And the fact that we are doing this under a waste, fraud, and abuse context, and I think that's important, but we're closing these businesses who aren't going to be paid, and there's a lot of small providers. And again, I know that you've heard all this, and we appreciate it, and I agree with my colleagues. I want fairness. Just because you're a big provider, I don't think that a big hospital system should have to wait and be penalized in this fashion. But what's critical in a rural and frontier state like mine in New Mexico, that means that an entire community in a place like Gallup or in my district, in Torrance County, there aren't any providers. There aren't any durable medical equipment providers. There aren't any small oncology providers. They're done. You have zero access. And we don't even have the right tools or strategies to recreate these practices. So I'm really interested as a result of understanding now the situation between how they're adjudicated, what your initiatives are, how you're trying to manage these cases. I feel I appreciate the weekly meetings. But I would encourage you to go back to Ms. Tavenner and the Secretary and be really clear, at least some of these comments, and I think it seems to me like we're all on the same board in the subcommittee, that we've got a problem on the front end. So we do want updates, I do, and want information about what you're doing on the back end. And I want to be careful that people feel like because it's cumbersome, that they can win on an appeal even when there might be a material problem. But I think the bulk of these cases, and the reason that you now have 500,000 cases coming to you on appeal, is because they are administrative issues that don't come anywhere close to fraud, waste, and abuse. And we need to deal with that issue sooner than later. And I don't know that you, as a comment to make back, except that my expectation is that you'll take this urgency back, because we are, with all the work that we've done to maximize access, this effort is minimizing it to the highest degree, and it has a chilling effect on our patient populations.
I would certainly take that back. And, you know, if there is a positive that is coming out of this situation, I think it is that the Department is viewing this workload more holistically. Although there are 3 separate agencies, CMS, OMHA, and the Departmental Appeals Board and Medicare Appeals Council, that work with these workloads, the Department is taking an active role in trying to resolve things. And so I will take your concerns back. I certainly share them. I was also say I was very pleased when I came here to OMHA to be part of an agency that had, for the most part, met its 90-day time frames. You know, as an administrator myself, I find the delays very troubling and unacceptable. You basically have here, though, a workload and capacity problem at our level.
Can we get to that for a moment? Because, I mean, we can sit here and complain for hours, and nothing's going to change. Because the addition of 17 new ALJs, you talk about the simple math that my good friend Mr. Meadows had referenced. There's 500,000 appeals that will be backlogged by the end of this year. You divide that by 1,220, and you're working at optimal levels, and I don't know that you could do any more than that. And frankly, I don't know that we would want you to do more than that, because giving less than 2 hours to every case is probably unfair and would be slipshod. That would suggest that we would need 410 new ALJs if we wanted to get rid of that backlog in a year. 410, and you have asked for 17, or you have been given 17. So we're basically saying to all the providers out there, suck it up. Excuse my language, but that's basically what we're saying to them. We're saying that we're not willing to deal with this backlog in the reality that it is. We're putting blinders on. We're going to add a few more and cross our fingers and hope that with a few new reforms that you put in place that it's going to, but it's not going to reduce it to the extent that we're not going to be back here next year with the same discussion. So how would you comment to that?
Well, there are several things. One,
Ms. Griswold, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you pull your microphone a little bit closer to you?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. You know, there are several funding issues here, and in my mind, one of the primary ones has to do with the recovery audit program and the recovery audit legislation. I think when Congress passed the legislation for the program, it was envisioned that that program would be self-funding out of recoveries. But the legislation actually provides that the administrative costs of CMS will be covered. That does not include the administrative costs or the of OMHA or the administrative costs of the Departmental Appeals Board. So what we have basically had in that regard is a workload that came in on us that was basically unfunded. So I think that's part of the problem, and it's a part of the problem that I think does have a solution. And so if I were queen for a day,
yes, what would you have us do?
That would be one of the simple fixes that I think would be possible.
Meaning what? The fix
to in some way
properly
be able to properly fund OMHA, and I'll put in a plug for my sister agency, the Departmental Appeals Board, so that the recovery audit appeals that come to the last two levels are funded out of the administrative costs are funded out of the program as they are at the lower two levels.
So is there enough money that is recovered by the RACs to pay for all of the levels of appeal?
Yes, I think that there is, yes. And this is based on CMS's reports on the recoveries that are coming from that program. So that is one part, I think, of the solution. There's some other things as well. We're doing these two pilots. One involves alternative adjudication models, using a settlement conference facilitation. Mm-hmm. If that pilot is successful, I think we need to look at some things like that as well.
Where's that? Is that being piloted in a geographic location or with a certain type of file?
It's being piloted at the Office of Medicare Hearings and Appeals. There's no geographic location. It's being done with Part B, I believe. Yeah, Part B claims right now. And there's a certain time period where we are offering these facilitated settlement conferences. CMS has
give us an example of what that means.
Well,
real life terms.
Well, real life terms, and it was put on our website on June 30th. So it's a very new program, and we're waiting to see how appellants respond to it. But the theory is that an appellant will be able to come in and ask for a settlement conference with an attorney who is at OMHA. CMS would provide someone there with settlement authority who would be able to discuss the merits of the claim and possibly resolve them short of them having to stay in the queue and go to hearing. That is the theory. While that is going on, they do not lose their place in the hearing queue, so they would still remain there. But we're hopeful that this will allow us to resolve some of the pending claims. This is a two-part problem. There are the pending claims that we have. There are also the receipts that are coming in. This piece of the solution is designed to deal with the pending cases that are already with us.
So is it your assumption it's the slam dunk cases that are going to come at that settlement process? Go back to Mr. Meadows' statement about a signature's in the wrong spot, and they walk in and say, it's not at the top, it's at the bottom, it's right here. Is it your assumption it's going to be that kind of stuff coming at you? Or what is your assumption coming at you with the settlements? And are the settlements for a lesser amount than fully paid, or is it fully paid, so they're at a faster process to full payment?
I think it depends. Like most settlement conferences, it's going to be probably a little bit of give and take. That would be my anticipation. But if it's something that we can, in the course of what's really a pre-hearing conference with an attorney, point out a simple error, a technical error or something like that in these claims, then, it is potential, it is possible that they would be fully paid. We have to wait and see how that would work.
So this alternative dispute resolution would be valuable to providers in particular if it was a decision that was going to be made swiftly.
Yes.
So that becomes the appeal.
We're trying to find ways of resolving claims within our pending workload more quickly than we can get them to an ALJ. And we're trying to do that given our current authorities. Right now, the way the statutory scheme is structured, an appeal cannot get out of Step 3. It cannot leave OMHA without action by an ALJ. So what this would do, there would be this agreed-upon settlement. Both parties would sign, and the judge would then dismiss the appeal. So the agreement becomes the resolution of the claims.
So is that listed in the chart that you gave us as a dismissal, long-term? Or
It would end up being a
as being
dismissal.
favorable, fully favorable, or?
It would probably be a dismissal, but right now we're just tracking them separately as a settlement resolution.
Okay.
How about the other alternative is this global settlement discussion concept, which claimants that have very similar kinds of cases would all be invited to come in and participate in a global settlement, but they could choose not to, I gather. Is that correct?
This is an initiative that is one of CMS's initiatives, and I have to admit that my knowledge on this is limited. But you know, it's my understanding that it would be a global settlement.
So that would happen before it even got to you?
I think it also contemplates, they are also looking at claims that are pending at all levels of the process.
So we really haven't seen it operational yet?
No, we have not. It's an initiative that is still pending.
Okay, so I know you're communicating back and forth with CMS, and CMS is part of the issue, and I get that that's not you. But you have these regular conversations. When we're getting to an attorney, helping to try to do a type of pre-settlement, what you're talking about before it gets to an ALJ, that's really something that they would have rather had with CMS, and to get this done a long time ago, to face with someone there, resolve this, or to be able to get on the phone and everybody looks at the same document and tries to resolve this. If they're simple, straightforward cases, they just want this resolved. If they are a physical therapist that is trying to take care of his practice as well as trying to do all the paperwork, he does not need one more thing to do to try to chase all this stuff down. And just to be able to leave and go do a hearing and to be in that process or to hire outside counsel is well beyond what they want to be able to do. They just want resolution of simple things. How could a process like what you're experimenting with work in a CMS so it never gets to you? We're still trying to figure out how do we prevent the backlog.
Right. And I think among CMS's initiatives, you will see mention of a discussion period, particularly with regard to recovery audit. And I think that could be helpful in resolving these claims at the lower level.
But that's not something you're aware of that they do.
That.
That's something they're discussing, but that's not something that they do currently.
I really can't speak to that. I don't know to what extent they have a discussion period right now.
It's optional in the RAC cases, and it was retracted 44% of the appellants that engaged in it. Cases were not reopened.
Okay. I am informed that it's optional right now in the RAC cases, recovery audit cases.
That at the CMS level they can do some sort of discussion as well?
I think so, but I'll have to check on that. I'd rather get back or have CMS get back to you on that.
I understand. I don't want to push outside and try to answer for them. We're just trying to do some fact gathering as well.
I understand.
Because again, we come down to the issue of they just want resolution.
Absolutely.
And once the RAC contractor grabs it, files it, lays it out there, they lose contact with them, and now they're fighting with someone else. And really their fight is first with the RAC folks they can't get to anymore because it's too late. They've made their decision and they filed it, and then the RAC auditor is trying to figure out, playing the percentages literally, that if they grab 10 or 15, they know they're going to get 3 or 4 of these at least get paid, and they get paid a percentage of each of them. So it's a whole different game for them. But for the provider, our issue all along is if it's fraud, and we ought to bust them. If it's a good provider, this should not be harder. These are the folks we need on our team and that the American people need rather than hurt.
I fully agree, and I think that identifying not just Medicare fraud but also improper payments is an important piece of this puzzle. But what we have done, I guess, in the zealous efforts to implement Congress's intent in that regard, it's gotten out of balance. And what we need to do is restore that balance at this point between the fraud efforts and the appeal rights. And so I have spoken with the Secretary on these issues, and I know she's committed to restoring that balance.
You know, I had a RAC in my district that was creating a great deal of discomfort for one of the hospital providers in my district. And it was also a hospital that was under a lot of financial pressure to just keep its doors open. And my experience with that particular situation suggests that more than anything else, the provider wants to know what's going to be approved. Now, they could have, in fact, have been unbundling services that, would allow for more reimbursement. I don't remember the elements of it. Sometimes, the providers are in a bind and are looking for ways to upcode or to unbundle services. So we need to be smart about this and not appear to be taking one side or another. Everyone should be treated the same, but it's so important for there to be some certainty and some finality and some timeliness to these decisions. And this backlog, I keep coming back to this backlog because we're not getting anywhere near addressing that, even with all of these new proposals that haven't even been tested, really. So I still think that we've got to do, whether we hire temporary ALJs for a period of 1 year and deal with this backlog. Otherwise, we haven't really accomplished much.
And just to address that, there are very, very limited authorities for hiring temporary ALJs. And this is statutory under the Administrative Procedures Act. Really, there are two ways. You can try and get a loan, a judge on loan from another agency. Most agencies have their own backlogs. And when we went forward requesting loaner judges in April, we did not get any. So the other way is to hire judges who have retired, and they're called rehired annuitants, senior ALJs. Those individuals are also on a list that's maintained by OPM. They can be hired for a couple of years and then let go. Beyond that, an ALJ appointment is, essentially a life appointment, except for removal for good cause after a hearing before the MSPB.
So how large is this list of retired ALJs?
How many were there? 9? It's probably around 100. It's not a tremendously long list, but we do have that. We requested it in April because we do think that temporary capacity is a part of this solution to deal with the backlog. Now, when you're talking about projected receipt levels, I do think we need to be appropriately staffed for what we anticipate to be coming in. So I don't know if that's helpful, but ALJs are non-probationary. When you hire them under the APA, there's no probationary period. There are no performance reviews, and they can't receive awards. So those are kind of the things that make them different from other government employees.
If the gentlewoman would yield, I want to follow up because they're hitting on precisely the point and why it's so incredibly important that you're here today, but it really is about what's coming to you and how do we address that. The bigger concern that I have is even if you hired your 100, it would still be shy based on my simple math of what's going to happen, because this doesn't stop today. It's growing exponentially every day. I think it's 1,500 appeals at least a week. Is that correct?
It has been as high as 16,000 appeals a week.
A week.
It has been down slightly at the beginning of this year to 11,000. We're trying to figure out where the plateau is going to be.
Well, I guess I was told by Jonathan Blum before he left that there was a policy change within CMS that was initiated, and maybe numerous policy changes, but there was a policy change between 2011 and 2012 that dealt with the way that they start to refer these to you. part of it's RAC, but part of it was, and that he needed a legislative fix. Now, my question to him was, if it was a policy change, why do you need a legislative fix? But what I'm concerned about is what changed in 2011 or 2012 to make this number grow that you're getting when we're not seeing payments, the payments, improper payments actually go down. So we've seen no progress in terms of improper payments, and yet we've got this huge problem on our hands, and we're not saving any money. So what changed in 2011 or 2012? And I'll yield back to the Chairman. I'll let you.
Okay. Well, the big thing was the recovery audit, of course. You know, we've talked about that. That was initially a pilot program in 2009-ish. You know, we saw, I think it was 4 states.
But that was an act of Congress. He indicated it was a policy within their agency. That I don't know if.
And it's probably, I mean, there was, and it was probably around that time period where there was a focus on identifying improper payments. That's not tracked as part of our, you know, we track the recovery audit separately. But CMS's efforts to identify improper payments, the ZPICs, Zone Program Integrity Contractors, and the others, you know, Zone Program, who are really looking at fraud issues. And there was also a coding initiative and some other things like that. But anytime there are efforts at CMS's level that result in a denial of more claims, then at our level there is going to be an increase in appeals.
But that's my point. It didn't change the improper payments. I mean, they may have done that, and it may have been well-intentioned, but we're still, actually, they increased. If you look at the numbers, you can go on there. We had a hearing yesterday, and so that's fresh in my mind. But I'll yield back. I want to thank the ranking member and the chair for their leadership on this and their graciousness to allow me to be included.
And if I could,
Go ahead.
Could I go back to one issue that you raised earlier, which I think I have finally kind of grasped what the question may have been, and that has to do with our appropriation and how that is handled. And of course, as you pointed out, the Medicare Modernization Act did contain language which would authorize to be appropriated funds that would, you know, cover an increase in adjudicators as needed. Having said that, though, that appropriation still has to be approved, and it does have to go through our department's appropriation process. So I just wanted to point that out. I would also say, with regard to our general appropriation, that, you know, we do know we've been living in challenging budgetary times. And in the past 5 years, President's budget has actually only been approved for us in 1 of the 5 years. So requests that we have gone forward with, even though they be somewhat modest, have really only been approved this year. And so we appreciate that. We're trying to do what we can with the money that's been appropriated to us.
So, and that was approved because it was part of the omnibus bill?
Oh, was it part of the omnibus bill?
Why was it approved this year? And
I don't know whether it was part of an omnibus bill or what it was part of, but I do know that we've received President's budget this year. I'm sorry.
so is there any other statutory authority you think you need or could use?
Or solutions that you would propose?
Yeah. You know, I think that there are a number of things that are going to be coming through the appropriate legislative process that we're looking at. I think the 2 that I've highlighted from our perspective will provide us with the greatest ability to handle our workloads and to expand the way that we adjudicate claims at OMHA. There are some additional things that are being considered that you know, through the departmental work group that I know will be coming up through the proper legislative channels.
When will you evaluate the settlement process? We obviously just started June the 30th, so it's just starting. When is your target date to do your initial evaluation? Is it a year? Is it 6 months?
No,
What is
we're
it?
looking at a 6-month evaluation.
Okay. Can you put us on a calendar reminder, and 6 months from now, send it to this committee as well, so we
Certainly.
can get a feel for that also?
And we're tracking a number of metrics with that from which we'll judge the success of the program. We'd be happy to include you in that.
Okay. Please do. This committee is obviously very interested in that.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any further questions. I just want to thank Ms. Griswold for being so attentive to our questions and for sitting around for an hour and a half while we went and voted. And thank you for your service
Important work.
to our country.
I thank you for your interest in this issue. It's certainly one near and dear to our hearts as well.
It's near and dear to a lot of people in our district that not only want to deal with the fraud and waste and loss and improper payments, which is important to everyone, including everyone on this dais, but also to providers that absolutely, firmly, intensely hate the RAC audit process. And when they go through it and there is a signature in the wrong place or a date in the wrong spot and they just want to get it resolved, it now takes 3 years to get it resolved at times. So it goes from their frustration about RAC to their frustration about getting an obvious solution that doesn't help any of us. So finding alternative solutions like what you're proposing on the settlement process, that they could go through that process. If they don't like it, is what it sounds like to me. If they don't like what happens in the settlement, they still are in the queue to be able to resolve. Is that correct, or they leave?
No, they are absolutely in the queue, and there's nothing mandatory about that settlement process. You know, at any point they can exit the process.
They just want an answer. So that's very important to be able to find.
And they're entitled to an answer.
They are.
I realize that.
They are, and so that's a key thing. And so if you're working on processes to do that, thank you. Continue to press, and if there are ways that we can help in the process, because as Mrs. Spear has mentioned, bringing on more ALJs is not going to solve this. There's no way you're going to get 400 more ALJs. So there has to be another solution into this to be able to determine how do they get answers. Part of this, we understand well, is on CMS. You should not have the number get to you that is getting to you. So if you have and I'm looking at these percentages, and I know we've kicked around numbers on it, but let me just mention this one other number on it. When I look at the percentages, I pull out the remanded because those are coming back. That's a different number. I pull out dismissed because they're not even getting to you. That's not there. And the other I can pull out. When I look at that, fully favorable and partially favorable just for Part A, and I'm aware of the other numbers, that's showing a 65% either fully favorable or partially favorable resolution for them if they get to you. That's telling me the job is not getting done on the CMS side. You should not have that high of a percentage of overturn getting to you. There's something being missed. So part of the issue is we've got to press on CMS to get some of these things resolved before they ever get to you, so you don't have a backlog this high. Just statistically, you shouldn't have a 65% overturn rate to be able to get to you. So that's not on you, but I'm just saying publicly there are issues on the previous two that we've got to get resolved in the days ahead. Any other comments? Thank you as well for spending the day, and we apologize for the long delay in the middle of a recess. With that, we are dismissed.